Okay. Hi, everybody. It's Ruth and Nick Holt here. We're recording on December 8th, 2022, and the time is about 2:45 Central Time, and we are recording in 3, 2, 1. So welcome TFC friends and family and foot nerds and tennis people, especially. I'm Ruth, and I'm here with Nick Holt again, and this is our second episode relating to foot nerd tennis. So Nick and I are both foot nerds, and we want to thank you for being here with us and taking the time to listen to this and explore with us today's topic, footwear, all things footwear related. And we are foot nerds who love tennis. We are creating a digital product that's going to be released in 2023 because we love tennis. And because Nick and I have noticed in our tennis communities that people who love tennis love to play and are usually plagued with like chronic tension and pain, acute and chronic injuries. And so we're on a quest to see if we can help ourselves and all of our tennis friends play for longer periods of time, to increase the longevity of our tennis playing and also to play as pain-free as possible. So what we want to do today is we want to talk about our footwear, because we're foot nerds for a reason, and that is that we take excellent care of ourselves, but we start with the feet as the foundation. And even though many of us who play tennis might not actually have foot pain currently, so many of us are dealing with ankle, knee, hip, and back pain. And we don't even realize that those issues are being caused most likely from what's happening at the feet and the hips. So today we want to explore in a good amount of big picture, high level detail about our footwear, the different kinds of footwear, what we do with our feet in tennis and outside of tennis, and how that is affecting our foot health. So we're going to dig in. And we're going to start with Nick, and he is going to introduce the concept of why are we talking about footwear in a little more depth.
Yeah, great intro, Ruth. Good to see everybody. So yeah, I think it's really important to start because I think we both get the question of, okay, what's the best tennis sneaker, or what sneaker should I buy? And I think even more important to that is looking at the health of your feet, because, I think as foot nerds, we take really good care of our feet. And I think if you have really healthy feet, you can actually get away with wearing a lot of different shoes. I think people who have problems or maybe unhealthy feet, they're not going to be able to wear a wide variety of shoes. So I think it's really important to step back and understand sort of what the current sort of health and status of your feet are right now in this moment, because I think big picture, that matters way more than the actual shoe that you're wearing on the tennis court. So I'd love to just go through a quick demo with you, and I'll have sort of Ruth show you guys just a quick sort of foot assessment to see what the status of your foot is right now. So the first one is just looking at the shape of your foot. So maybe we can, just bring your foot up so you can see Ruth's foot. So what we want is that foot to get naturally wider as we get to the toes. So we want the toes to be nice and wide. And if we think about our foot as our foundation, right, that's going to really create a nice stable foundation that creates strength and stability for everything up the body. You'll see a lot of people, because of the shoes we wear, they'll be nice and pointed in. You'll see that big toe kind of drift to that second toe. And that's really not going to create that strong, stable base that we want. So step one is, what is the current shape of your foot? Step two is, how well can you splay your toes? Do you have the ability, and Ruth's going to show us here, just standing on the ground, you can do this kneeling. Can you splay all 5 toes out? Can you get that toe splay? And most importantly, yep, you were just doing it. Can you articulate each toe? So we're going to try to bring the big toe up without lifting the 4 toes. And then we're going to do a little toe yoga. Can you drive the big toe down and lift all 4 toes and kind of go between those 2? Now, for many of you, you're not going to be able to do this, and that's okay. but we're just showing you kind of what what healthy feet look like. Nice job, thank you. And then the last one, this one we're gonna do the human handshake or the human toe spreader. We're gonna try to interlace our hands or fingers in between each toe. And we're just going to check in with your body. Some of you, this might be really easy. For some of you, this is going to be really uncomfortable and really painful. So again, it's just a quick assessment to see. Nice, Ruth. And then you can kind of wring your foot out a little bit, see how kind of stiff or sort of fluid the foot is. You want that foot to be able to move. You want those toes to be able to articulate. Awesome. Thank you, Ruth. So,
I want to just say really quick that I stuffed my feet into shoes that were too small for me for most of my life. This is kind of, sorry, you have to see the dirty part, but I go barefoot a lot. But you can see on this foot, if I don't actively splay my toes, they naturally go into the foot shape of my shoe that I wore for most of my life.
yeah.
So that is an important thing to notice.
Yeah, and I don't think we're not going to talk about it today, but I think the importance of that big toe, and as far as for any tennis player, but especially those who want to play at a high level, that big toe is a really important driver of performance. To be able to press off of that big toe, to explode, to jump, to be able to move really well, you need to have that mobility in that big toe. And what Ruth was just sharing there was most people don't have that big toe mobility. So really important. Yeah. So that's step one, right? Before we even get into the shoes, is to understand sort of a current health of our feet. And so do that assessment. If you haven't already, maybe pause the video and go through those quick little assessments to see sort of how your feet are currently operating right now. Anything else to add on that, Ruth?
We'll talk about this more in other conversations too, but it's important to notice that, a quarter of our joints are in our feet, and there's a bunch of muscles and joints in there, and you have joints in your body because they're designed to move. So you have 33 joints in each of your feet, and that, like, your foot is designed to move. But because we wear shoes that sort of cast our feet regularly and often, we don't have, our feet are stiff and usually not very movable in the ways that we could be moving them. And I would even argue that regardless of what level of tennis you aspire to play, that we're going to talk about the importance of how your big toe moves in other episodes as well.
Yeah. And then lastly, I think even for a lot of people thinking, okay, you don't have foot pain, or your foot doesn't hurt, or you're not sort of expressing any kind of pain in your foot. Understand how important the foot is to sort of whole body health. And then if you are dealing with a knee sort of issue or a hip or low back issues, a lot of times that can be caused by an unhealthy foot. So with tennis, we're on our feet. Obviously, we're taking thousands of steps playing our matches. So if you have any kind of imbalances in that foot, it could show up the chain. And a lot of times we see that in either knee, hip, or low back issues. So even if you aren't expressing pain, it's really important to kind of check out your foot health.
Yep. Okay, so
now we'll dive into the shoes. Yeah,
so we wanted to give like a big picture view of the anatomy of footwear. So I think this is probably a very obvious when we think about shoes, and even when you hear it. But we want to go through the anatomy of all shoes, and then we're going to break down the difference between what we consider to be a natural shoe and an unnatural shoe based on a set of criteria. So I'm just going to use my little tennis shoe here that I wear around sometimes. And the first thing we're going to start with is the sole. So the sole is essentially the bottom flap of the shoe that's designed to the original design of a shoe. This was the most important part, which was to protect our feet from abrasions and punctures. And back in the day when we were like living in caves and stuff, it was just a small animal hide that was like created to protect the bottoms of our feet. And then the upper of any shoe is the coverage, or the material on the shoe that will connect to the sole of the shoe. And that has a whole range of possibilities too, right? So the most amount of coverage being like maybe work boots or steel-toed boots, or super amount of big material in boots, to fashionable shoes, leather, tennis
More
shoes,
basketball/tennis.
basketball, yep, all the way down to like strappy sandals and flip-flops, where you have the least amount of attachment of the upper to the sole. And then we have the toe box. So the toe box is I'm going to just use the zeros. So the toe box is where the forefoot, all of your fleshy, meaty, bony toes go in the front of the shoe. And so that comes in different widths. So from very narrow and pointy to very wide, and we'll talk about that more in just a second. And then it comes in height. So you can measure the toe box by how wide it is, and also how much height between the bottom of the shoe and the top of the shoe. And then the last and probably the most important part of the shoe is the heel. So the heel of the shoe is going to either be measured in very flat or neutral, meaning zero drop. So you might hear that term a lot if you are a foot nerd or a person who has already explored natural footwear. You have no in neutral shoes or zero drop shoes, there is absolutely no ramp from the heel to the forefoot. So, and that can range obviously from that neutral ground where the heel and the forefoot are on the same level, to even just a tiny wedge, and then all the way up to like 5-inch stilettos. So that's the basic anatomy of any shoe. And then we want to talk about the spectrum from natural footwear to unnatural footwear. And the way that we, as foot nerds and people who are caring for our feet, will talk about natural footwear versus unnatural footwear are with the criteria of 4 questions to evaluate, and that are the 4 F's. So the first one, is the shoe foot shaped? Now, I am a woman who loved shoes, and I loved boots, and I especially loved a heel. But in the last 3 years, I don't have any of those kinds of shoes to show you any longer. But I do have this shoe that's kind of considered, it's more along the unnatural spectrum. So this is probably the most unnatural shoe that I have. So we're just going to use this as just as a determination for the criteria that we're going to use in asking ourselves the questions. Is the shoe itself foot shaped? So most people would say, hell yeah, that's a very wide shoe. But in my brain, this is actually not a foot shaped shoe as compared to something like this. So here, this is more narrow and pointy. And then this is the shoe foot shaped, meaning is it wider at the forefoot than at the heel? The next question is the shoe flexible? So all of my shoes are flexible because that's maybe you can show one of your shoes, Nick, one of your more stiff shoes.
Yeah.
So even this shoe this is still pretty flexible. And then this FC or water shoe is like really flexible. And so there's a range, right? From a stiff, super protective boot to a whole spectrum of stiffness. So that is a question. Is the shoe flexible? And depending on what you're using it for, how flexible is it? And this is another question to ask yourself. The next one is about the heel. Is it flat? So like we said before, does it have zero drop? Meaning, is the heel on the same level as the forefoot? So you can see here in this shoe, this is an extreme version of natural footwear where you can see that your forefoot and your heel are going to be on the same level. And then any tiny little wedge in there, even like even here, this is an example of a lower wedge tennis shoe, but any wedge in there is going to be considered a positive heel, and that can range all the way up to, again, like super big, tall, fancy shoes. So if it's the flatter it is, the more on the spectrum of natural footwear it is, the more heel wedge that you have in the under the heel, the more it's considered to be unnatural footwear. You're heading towards that range. And then the last one is cushioning. So can you feel the ground? So again, I'll compare two. This here is, you could feel the ground completely. It's like just a very thin layer of rubber. And it's just there to protect you against like little rocks and, you know, punctures and stuff on the ground, but you can feel everything. And then there is, this one has a little more cushioning, and the shoes that Nick showed you also have cushioning, so you can feel the ground less. So the more cushioning you have, the more arch support you have and all that good stuff, the less you can feel the ground beneath you. So those are the 4 F's. Is it foot shaped? Is it wider at the front of the forefoot than it is at the heel? Is it flexible, or how flexible is it? How flat is it? Is the heel on the same level as the forefoot? And can you feel the ground beneath you? So if you can answer yes definitively to all those questions, you're headed to the natural spectrum of footwear. And any question that you answer no, or there's variation, you're headed to the unnatural part of the continuum. So those are the criteria. And I think it's just important to note right here that we're not suggesting that people who play tennis and racket sports who have not ever experimented with natural shoes before just run out and replace all of their shoes. That's not what we're suggesting at all. And Nick was saying earlier, like, we have tools for specific reasons, but we want to open up the conversation to a broader evaluation of, like, can we get our feet as healthy as possible outside of our tennis matches, outside of our practices and games, so that when we choose a tennis shoe that we're playing with, that our feet are as healthy and as strong and as mobile and as flexible as they can be, so that we can do those activities without, keeping our whole bodies healthy, including our feet. So now, what do you have to say about that, Nick?
Yeah, that was great. Yeah. I think just to kind of hit that point home, like, this is my most minimal shoe, right? This is basically a sandal that's, I could sort of put it in my pocket. It's very flexible. Now, I'm probably not going to go and play tennis in this shoe, but if I wear this shoe or spend time barefoot, I'm going to promote sort of proper foot health and have a healthy foot, so that when I wear, this is a Babolat shoe that's really sturdy. It does have a little bit of a positive heel. If you look at the toe box, it is a little bit narrow. So I'm going to probably play in this shoe because it gives me the support, it gives me the stability, but I'm going to spend the bulk of my time in something like this. So I'm promoting better foot health. So I think that's a really important distinction. And this kind of gets into this sort of first principles approach that we take here, and understanding what's called the SAID principle, which is really just simply, it's specific adaptations to implied demands. And what that really means is just that your body sort of adapts to what you do, right? So if we're wearing shoes, that if I was to wear this shoe all day and it crunched up my toes like this, my body's going to adapt, and I'm probably going to lose the ability to articulate my big toe. I'm going to lose the ability to splay my toes. So it's the same thing. I think we talk a lot in the Foot Collective and in this space around sitting and how sort of damaging sitting is. It's the same idea that when we sit in a certain position, that gets our hip, it kind of locks our hips in a certain position, and it turns off certain musculature in the backside, or glutes, and maybe our hamstrings, and it really creates a lot of tension in the front of our hips. So if we sit a lot, we have to do things to offset that sitting. It's not that sitting is going to kill you, it's that you have to understand how much sitting you're doing and then doing things to offset that. So I think the same approach applies to footwear. I'm going to wear this shoe when I play tennis, but I know that this shoe probably isn't ideal for my overall foot health. So I'm going to spend more time when I'm not playing tennis. I'm going to do things to offset the damage of this shoe. So that could include everything from doing plantar resets, which is taking a ball and sort of massaging the bottom of my foot, wearing toe spreaders, which is just a piece of silicone that you put in between your toes. It sort of helps splay out your toes, doing certain exercises to offset the shoes. So I think this is a really important distinction, that tennis sneakers, are designed for performance, and I can run faster and I can stop and I can, play better in this shoe versus my sandal. But I have to understand that this shoe isn't necessarily designed for optimal foot health. So I think that's a really important distinction that we're trying to make. I think we both be on the same page around next shoe that you buy for your daily driver, try to have it be more natural. So try to, sort of follow those 4 F's that Ruth laid out. And, I think the last thing to mention is just making sure that we find a tennis shoe that fits well for your foot, because we do have different foot shapes, and understand that you want a sneaker that's nice and snug, that's going to support you on the tennis court.
Mm-hmm. So just to piggyback onto what you're saying, like Nick is saying that your footwear that you put on your feet is the input that your body is going to adapt to. And that, you've probably spent a ton of years playing in shoes that are super supportive. And so you don't just want to like switch, but we definitely want to start mobilizing. And Nick and I are going to talk about our journeys with our foot health a little bit and our footwear. And I am not as a high level of a player, but I actually started playing tennis in natural footwear, excuse me. So now I can't go back. So why don't you start us off, Nick, and we'll talk about our like our specific tennis life and the journey to the kinds of shoes that we're exploring with now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started playing tennis when I was 3 years old. So I've been playing, I'm 42 right now, so almost 40 years. I took a little bit of a break in my 20s and 30s, but never really thought about footwear. It was always, and I think it wasn't until probably about 10, 12 years ago, the book Born to Run, I think for a lot of people that put this whole barefoot running, the minimal shoe sort of movement on kind of the map for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was about 12 years ago. I left sort of the corporate world. I was sitting at a desk for a long time. I had stiff hips, I had stiff feet, and I had started getting into personal training and started helping people with their health. And it just so happened that I'd read that book. And so I started exploring sort of wearing more natural shoes about then. So about 10 or 11 years ago. And I made the mistake that I see a lot of people make, is that, we find a natural shoe, and then I would go out and I ran, 3 or 4 miles, and I completely strained my calf because my body wasn't, my calves weren't really, used to that load of actual sort of natural sort of forefoot striking. I'd probably been doing more of a heel strike and getting away with it because I had more of a cushioned shoe. And so I think it's a really important point to make, is that, when you do transition to a more natural shoe, you have to take it slowly. You have to progress slowly and let your body sort of build up the durability and the strength to be able to go for longer durations. But for me personally, now I still wear a traditional tennis shoe because I just feel like more support, and I feel like I have, especially because I play a lot on hard court. So I need a little bit more cushioning under my feet. But I would love, I think my goal is to find a shoe that is more natural. It still gives me the lateral stability that I want, and still gives me the cushioning, but doesn't compress my foot as much. So I'm on the lookout, and I think it is becoming more mainstream, I believe, as far as understanding how the foot works. And I think people are paying attention to this. So I wouldn't be surprised if we started to see more natural tennis sneakers in the near future. But what's your story with your evolution?
Well, I did not start playing tennis when I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I started playing tennis I played on and off throughout the years, like in recreational. I would take like a clinic through Parks and Rec. I always really loved just playing sports and being outside. It wasn't until a few years that I got a little more serious about it. And the reason why I got serious about it is because I started to heal an old knee injury. I had an ACL reconstruction from a basketball injury in 2005. And prior to that, I played college basketball, and I was always involved in sports and was just always a very active, sportaceous person. And when I hurt my knee, I got extremely depressed. I gained a bunch of weight. I didn't really know what it was from. I never had a surgery or an injury that bad before, but what I noticed over the years that passed was that I didn't trust my body anymore, and I started to wear shoes that were cushioned, and they were working fine, but I just wasn't able to play any of the sports that I really grew up loving playing. And so I was relegated. I did take up crew because I could sit and I could still get all that like juiciness of like running, and it was competitive, and I really liked that. So I did take up crew for a little while. But that took a lot of equipment, and you had to be in the right place, and there had to be a boathouse. When I became a part of the Foot Collective, I was playing a little bit of tennis, and I was wearing, I don't know what they're called, but they're actually like a basketball shoe, Adidas, and they were pretty flat, but had some cushion. And I started playing in those. And when I switched to an actual tennis shoe, because I had already been wearing these shoes, these don't exist anymore. If for those of you that see these and are like, oh, those are cool, I want a pair of those. They don't exist, but I started actually playing tennis in these, like just for fun. So I'm a recreational tennis player. I'm like, but whatever recreational level is at 3.0, according to the USTA, trying to get better every day. And then, and so I was playing in these because I could feel the ground. And my knee didn't hurt. So that was the thing. Like I started actually playing tennis in a very natural footwear. As I started to compete a little more, obviously these would send my coaches running for the hills. Like they just looked so weird, and they thought I was going to kill myself. So I switched to this Ultra Solstice. So this is a zero drop shoe, meaning that it doesn't have any positive heel, but it has a stack height, which is the cushioning, of about 23 millimeters, and a wide toe box. So you can see that the toe box is really wide compared to the heel, and it's really flexible. And so you could, it's pretty flexible this way, but it still provides some support on the heel and on the sides. I played with this, and my knee started hurting again. So these are now my fancy footwear that I wear to weddings, with the taffeta gowns and satin ribbons. And then I switched to a zero shoe. And so this is what I was playing tennis in for a while, which gave me a little bit of support, and super flexible. I can feel the ground, zero drop. And it has this removable insole that takes this shoe from a 7.5 millimeter stack height to 5.5 if you take out the insole. So I love feeling the ground. I also play a lot on a hard court, so I had to find something that I'm starting to get a little more competitive, where I need something that's going to be a little more supportive. And I actually found this. This is a water shoe. So this has a little more cushioning, and it's still really flexible. I love this shoe so much, and it has like good gription on the bottom and stuff. And it's not considered a natural shoe, but you can see that the toe box is nice and wide. So I've been playing on this. I go through my shoes like about every 3 months, so I'm just pretty hard on them. And then I'll just show you one other shoe. So this is an interesting transition shoe. This is called a Topo. So TOPO, it's the ST4. This has a stack height of, I think, 16 millimeters as opposed to 23, because he also used to wear the Solstice but switched to this recently. So it has a really nice wide toe box. The cushioning, the stack height is 16 millimeters, so you get a good amount of cushioning on the hard court, and then you get really nice support. It's not as flexible as some of the others, so it has a little bit more stiffness. So my journey from fashion footwear, stiletto heels, and to my transition to tennis playing, like these are my fancy shoes now. Oh, and I have these really cool, I wear these with dresses too and skirts. These are Feel Grounds, and you can you can do that with them and twist them all up and stuff. So I think the moral to the story there is that, there's like our shoe needs are going to be different per person. Like Nick has been playing in a tennis shoe for his whole life, and he's playing at pretty high levels, and he needs certain types of impact support. Whereas I started playing tennis in a natural shoe, and now it's trying to find the happy medium as I go forward on my tennis journey.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to sort of really hammer home, is that we all have these individual needs, but the even bigger picture is the time that you spend outside of playing tennis, try to have that be on more of the natural spectrum. So I actually have tried, I have a zero shoe as well, and I do sometimes play sort of recreational, just kind of messing around with this shoe, because it is flat, zero drop, it is pretty flexible. But if I need more of the support, I'll play more with the proper tennis sneaker that has more of that support, so I can sort of accelerate, decelerate a little bit more to sort of start and stop. But yeah, I think just trying to move to a more natural shoe outside of the tennis sneaker is going to be the most important, the biggest sort of lever that you can pull on as far as protecting your feet and being able to play longer and better and pain-free.
Yeah. So I just wanted to close up by maybe proposing a couple of experiments that you might try at home, besides what Nick presented with assessing your foot health and getting your toe splay and moving your toes individually, and the human toe spreader with your fingers, getting them in there and just squeezing and doing that. We also suggest that you give your closet a shoe audit, and then just see like what are the ranges of shoes that you're wearing. Ask yourself the questions of the 4 F's and just see where you can start to implement maybe the possibility of the next time you need a new pair of shoes, consider a natural shoe using the criteria of the 4 F's, and then take it really slow and maybe just like walk around in them, see how you feel, be your own citizen scientist, conduct your own experiments. Use pain as a signal, and soreness and stiffness, and then if it's too much, you just back off and start a little easier, and then keep going along and do your own experiments and see how you feel. The other experiment I propose is to calculate how many hours a day you sit in a chair or at a table or driving in your car or at your desk, and calculate, is the amount of time that you're sitting more than 2 to 3 hours, 4 hours max in a day, and are you moving every 20 to 30 minutes, and just start to take inventory of those important health questions. Anything to add to that before we say our goodbyes, Nick?
No, I love that. Yeah, because we're going to talk more about how the hip is really connected to the foot and how vital hip function is to everything, but especially if you do find yourself at a job or profession, or you're driving a car and you are sitting, again, just understanding how that's going to impact everything up and down the chain. So really just getting clarity around how much time are you spending in some of these unnatural shoes and how much time you're spending sitting, and just start there. And I think we'll get into hips and other stuff down the road, but I think that's a good entry level experiment for people to try.
Well, that's great. Okay, so we want to thank you again for taking the time to spend with us and learning about your foot health. And we also want to thank you for taking responsibility for your foot health, because taking care of you takes care of our entire tennis community. It means we all get to play longer, happier, and pain-free. And if you have any questions, please feel free to message us. We'll look at the comments. We'll leave some resources in the description box for you, and we want your feedback. So what is your tennis life like? What is your tennis community like? What are your shoes like? How can we help? We want to say ciao for now, and we'll see you next time.